Spoiler warning! Spoiler warning! Spoiler warning! I have had more trouble scripting this video than I ever thought possible. I scripted it once, and I was happy with it. I even got so far as voicing it, and I was pretty far into the editing process of that recording when news dropped that totally ruined almost everything I had said. That frustrated me in ways I hadn't even realized, cause when I tried to re-script it, I couldn't do it anywhere near as smoothly as I had the first time. Fast forward about a week and a half, and now I think I'm finally ready for this. But this video has become a much bigger beast than I had originally intended. What once was going to be a brief, snappy, but entertaining video about one of my all-time favorite pieces of fiction has now become an all-out review where I dig deep into the crevices of this beautiful, beautiful story. This is my first video about this certain series, but it brings me great joy to tell you that despite its size, it will not be my last. Today, I'll be talking to you about a modern masterpiece called Chainsaw Man. Okay, so that introduction was kind of serious and dramatic and not at all what we normally do here. And yes, I know that you all told me you wanted Jujutsu Kaisen content first, but you know what? This channel is mine! And if I decide to go against what you all want, I'm perfectly fine doing that. I like Kaisen, it's one of my favorite manga, but I wouldn't quite put it in the same ballpark as Chainsaw Man, and right now, things are going really, really well for that fandom, and the hype is just it's such a good time to be a Chainsaw Man fan. So, let's talk about it. What is Chainsaw Man? Chainsaw Man is the story of a boy named Denji. Denji doesn't have a last name, he's just Denji. Denji is a devil hunter who's inherited his father's massive, unbelievably huge pile of debt to the Yakuza, and kills devils solely for the purpose of paying off that debt. He does this job mostly alone, only accompanied by his pet chainsaw devil, Pochita, who he met as a young boy and made a contract with. Denji is obviously very poor. He and Pochita live alone together in a rundown shack where they often can only eat a single slice of bread for an entire day's meal. For the two of them, living a normal life is nothing but a pipe dream, and most nights, Denji is so hungry he can't even sleep. And that gets him thinking about his debt, which, as you can imagine, makes it even harder for him to sleep. To overcome all that and catch some Z's, he typically dreams about the basic kind of things that many of us have had the privilege of experiencing, like spreading jam on bread to make it taste better, or having a girl over and playing video games. Now, I know it sounds like I'm just reciting the manga to lengthen the video, but no, there's a point to me spelling out his life for you. Although yes, padding out the video makes it easier to make. Look at other shonen protagonists. Deku, Asta, Naruto, Ichigo, etc, etc. They've all known some kind of suffering to some extent. Naruto growing up an orphan and having no friends or knowing what it's like to be treated nicely. Deku having only his mother and being discriminated against by his fellow students for not having a quirk. Asta being an orphan and having no magic, thus being looked down upon by everyone in society, and Ichigo losing his mother at a young age. Now, imagine having a Naruto-type backstory, but like 20 times worse. Or an Asta-type backstory, but like 40 times worse. Or a Deku-type past, but like 60 times worse. Or a— Alright, I get it! Denji has had the hardest life I've ever seen a shonen protagonist have. And yet, he continues to dream, and hold on to those dreams, even when he's so busy the Yakuza won't even let him think about them. He's been living this kind of life since he was a child, and without going into spoilers, his life before that wasn't great either. It's not like his dad was the 4th Hokage or a secret Soul Reaper. No, according to the first chapter at least, he offed himself. And from that point on, Denji had been surviving on his own his entire life, never having a real childhood or even what you could call an actual life. Now, everything I've said so far doesn't really spoil anything, and I'm trying to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, although I'm going to spoil a little bit, nothing too crazy. This is all just from the beginning of the first chapter. But my point is that Denji truly knows what it's like to suffer and struggle for no other purpose than to survive, with the hope of eventually having a normal life. But don't worry, things do get better for Denji, but not until they get worse. So, like I said before, the Yakuza often don't even let him think about his dreams, and the night of Denji Denji's quote-unquote death is no exception. That night, the apparent head honcho of the Yakuza goes banging on Denji's door, saying they've got a devil they need him to handle before he can even try and fall asleep. So, they go to what looks like an abandoned warehouse, saying once inside, he thanks Denji for his entire life's worth of servitude, but reveals that he and the rest of the Yakuza went and followed Denji's example and made their own contract with a devil. The zombie devil, in fact. Not long after, Denji and Pochita are killed and thrown away in a dumpster. And no, this isn't the usual, show the protagonist is near death or about to die, when suddenly he's saved by the plot and given the most broken power ever. No, he died. Like, he is dead. See that? D-E-D. Dead. Pochita, however, is not fully dead and is able to speak to Denji one last time, making a contract with him where he gives him his heart, and in return, Denji shows him his dreams. Now, this can be seen as convenient, and you might be like, well, of course, the main character can't die, it's only chapter 1, and this is a shonen, there's no way they could kill him off. On the contrary, Denji did, in fact, die, and even when he was reborn, he wasn't the same person. Well, definitely not physically anyway, but he had also become something more untamed. Something that couldn't be controlled so easily. In fact, this new Denji was tired of being controlled and was willing to do something about it. Now, for those who have read the manga, you know control is a very important word in this series. The idea of being controlled to the point where you can't take it and won't stand for it any longer. The idea of thinking for yourself and wanting what you want instead of just what you have and being limited by the world around you is something that you will see more than once in Chainsaw Man. And that's good on its own, but the execution is just absolutely immaculate. Chainsaw Man deeply explores a concept you can find in lots of other anime and manga, and that's the concept of giving up your humanity in order to make a change. Attack on Titan has mentioned this concept, with Eren having to fully embrace his Titan ability in order to turn the tide against the battle between the Titans and humanity. Black Clover has explored it as well, spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't fully read it yet, but Asta makes a deal with his devil to give up his right arm in order to meet his captain's expectations and fight alongside him. But Chainsaw Man does it in such a seamless way, and I feel the impact here is much greater on a more personal level. Basically, by giving up his humanity, Denji has essentially gotten rid of anything that was making his life miserable. By becoming Chainsaw Man, he's given himself the power to cut through the very people that have been controlling him his entire life. Effectively, by doing what he's always been told to do, kill devils. The Yakuza members pretty much became devils when they made their contract, and so Denji just did what he's always done, and went and killed them all. Now, by doing this, he had completely wiped away his debt, meaning he was free to do what he wanted with his life, and no one could tell him otherwise. No one, that is, except for her. Essentially, the moment Denji freed himself, someone else came along and told him that that's not actually the case. When one person no longer owned him, someone else showed up to claim ownership. Except this was a whole new kind of ownership, with different limitations. This woman here is known as Makima, the leader of public safety, and while it seems by the end of the first chapter that Denji has achieved his dream and can now live the good life, the real suffering is only just beginning. Makima is, for better or for worse, one of the most incredible characters in the entire series, and fans generally have a love-hate relationship with her. I'm not gonna go any deeper than that about it, not in this video anyway, but she is, she's interesting. However, I will say that for a good chunk of the story, she serves as new motivation for Denji. Motivation to long for happiness, and to strive to improve. To not be happy with just what he has, but want something more. Now, for reasons I'm not gonna get into, this all goes to hell, and to be totally frank, we absolutely failed to protect the best boy's smile, but I digress. Even with a better quality of life achieved, Denji is still under someone else's order. He has no say in what he does, or doesn't do, or where he goes, or what he's supposed to think, and this is honestly kind of like us, as people when we're young. When we're kids, we look to our parents, our examples, and the environment around us to learn how to behave and what path to go down in life. As we grow, we tend to part with that way of thinking and strive for our own paths, despite what we once thought. Chainsaw Man is the story of a boy named Denji, a boy who never got to part with that way of thinking. Or rather, a boy who actually did part with it in a world where he was told that he could not. Okay, so we talked about the narrative aspects of what makes Chainsaw Man so great, now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the technical aspects. Now, a story can have great ideas, great philosophy, and great messages, but if the execution isn't good enough, the story will undoubtedly fall flat. Characters can be interesting and entertaining, but if they're not fleshed out enough, it can be really hard to understand them on more than just a basic level. Plot twists can be as shocking as you want them to be, but if they're too out of nowhere and the twists don't connect with the plot, they instead become plot holes. Chainsaw Man executes all of these things near perfectly with jaw-dropping ease. The ideas in Chainsaw Man about control and ownership and the desire for individualism, they're all clearly portrayed without having to be said by anyone. Makima doesn't say, "Hey, I'm gonna be your new owner." She says, "You have two options. 1, be killed by me as a devil, or 2, be kept by me as a human." Now, this still kind of has that "I'm gonna be your new owner" kind of energy to it, but her job, and the means by which Denji was reborn, make it feel much more natural. Makima's job is to kill devils, and since Denji is kind of like half and half, she phrases it in such a way that he feels like he has a choice, meaning he willingly let himself be owned by someone because 1, most people generally don't want to die, especially someone who just experienced what it was like, and 2, he had been owned his whole life. His actions on a day-to-day basis had been dictated by someone else, so really this was kind of all he knew. The way that this scene seamlessly connects with everything the first chapter set up, in a mere 4 pages no less, without having to explain everything I just did, is just one example of how Chainsaw Man's execution is second to none in this new generation of shonen manga. Now, one thing that shonen tend to do that kind of irks me is they'll introduce new characters that we're supposed to really care about, only to not use them very much, and before we know it, all their potential is just destroyed. My Hero Academia, for example, has a very nice cast of characters with lots of variety, but do I care about most of them? Well, not exactly. I like this one, 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 and this one. The rest, I honestly couldn't give 2 craps about. In Black Clover, I can't really say I care about all the characters equally, but I like just about all of them a lot, which makes me care about them more than I otherwise would, with the exception of these 3 characters. Chainsaw Man, however, has no issue at all in making me care about a character right from the get-go. Because it introduces most of the characters it expects us to become emotionally attached to almost immediately, and then either finds a way for them all to be included and present, as well as useful, or it kills them off in the most emotionally impactful way possible. But not until it knows we absolutely care for them and are on board with that character. It took me 1 chapter to become invested in Aki as a character, not because of him being interesting at all, because he really wasn't at first, but because of how he interacted with Denji. And it took me 2 whole seconds to fall in love with Power, because she's Power, and how could you not love her? Once I decided I liked these characters, I never once thought, nah, I don't know if I still like them, because the story wouldn't let me. Before I could even begin to think that, it gave me a new reason to love them even more. Makima, from the get-go, was established as a likable character, but not one you should necessarily trust, and that's all I'm gonna say, but basically, she never wavers from that, and it's never any less enjoyable later on than it is from the beginning. Now, the plot twists, and oh baby are there plot twists, are mostly flawless, with only one being a little underwhelming, but it's made up for pretty soon after, so don't worry. Sadly, I can't get into those very much without walking into Spoiler City, but basically, it's when we fail to protect Best Boy's smile and everything becomes... Hello, darkness, my old friend. I will say, however, that these plot twists, one in particular, really flip everything we know about the series on its head. Our entire understanding, everything. We have to re-evaluate a lot as readers and think about what kind of manga this is. Is it a shonen action series? Is it a psychological mind game? Is it a coming-of-age story? Is it all of those things? These questions came to my mind a lot while reading, and that's more than I can say for anything I've ever watched or read. Also, speaking of me and my time reading this, I read 84 chapters in 3 days, which was all there was at the time. That's another thing I can't say about anything I've ever read. I blazed through this story like it was nothing, and that made my experience even better, even though I regret not being a fan sooner. Now, that being said, if you haven't read it, part 1 is finished now with 97 chapters, so hopefully I've convinced you to give it a shot so that you can binge the whole thing the way I did and get on the Chainsaw Man hype train while while there's still room for new fans. Because pretty soon, everyone is gonna know the name Chainsaw Man, and eventually everyone will see for themselves why it is a modern masterpiece. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see even more Chainsaw Man content, then let me know in the comments down below. Because although I did say that if I really want to do a video, I'll do it no matter what anyone says, it would be good to know you guys actually want to see this. If you like this video, give it a big ol' thumbs up, subscribe, and slash that notification bell with your normally I'd say anti-magic sword, but in this case...
12 seconds later.
Oh, I know! Slash that notification bell with your chainsaw powers, so you never miss an upload! With that, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!